Hello, and welcome to the Wyoming CSTA Podcast, the show for all things computer science in the WYO. I'm Megan Garnhart, CSTA Wyoming president and a Wyoming high school computer science teacher. For today's meeting, we have special guest Alec Kretch. Alec is the founder of OpenClass. Welcome, Alec. Thanks for joining us. Will you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. First of all, I'm happy to be here, so thank you for having me. I am Alec Kretch. I'm the founder and CEO of OpenClass. Brief introduction about myself. Before starting OpenClass, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, where I grew up as a huge sports fan, following the Cavs, Browns, and Guardians. And I've honestly always been interested in computers since I can remember. Started learning how to program when I was actually in middle school, playing around with a language that doesn't even exist today called Macromedia Flash, just creating little computer games. Got into web development later. Was really frustrated that my high school didn't offer any computer science classes, unfortunately. I know there have been a lot of strides there, especially led by CSTA to kind of make sure it's required for most high school classes to be able to offer some type of computer science classes. Um, Studied computer science in college, and even then was just frustrated with a lot of how my education was being conducted. We'll get into all of this more later on, but a lot of that inspired OpenClass. After I graduated, I worked as a software engineer in San Francisco for a little bit before eventually leaving to start OpenClass. So that's a brief introduction about myself.
Wonderful. We're so glad to have you. And I know you touched on it just a little bit, but it was like the perfect segue for us. So tell us about Open Class and why you created it.
100%. Yeah. So OpenClass is a learning platform that helps computer science instructors deliver interactive lessons, mastery quizzes, and adaptive review assignments, all of which leverage learning principles proven to optimize long-term learning outcomes, and all of which can include in-browser coding questions. We offer a lot of content generation tools for instructors to easily generate assignments through our platform, or we also have pre-built assignment sets available for classes like APCSA, APCSP, Intro to Python, and Intro to Swift. Or instructors can also build their own assignments from scratch through our platform. And in terms of why I created it, to be honest, so much of the platform was born out of my personal frustrations as a learner, especially when I was going through my college classes, where I just kept having this feeling of, why am I going to all of my lectures? Why am I trying to be a good student, trying to retain this information, but just leaving these classes and feeling like I'm retaining such a small percentage? Like, why won't this information stick? That really inspired me after I graduated to dive much deeper into the cognitive neuroscience of how people learn and retain information. Started learning about all of these principles like spaced repetition, retrieval practice, active learning, distributed practice, all of these things that are so strongly proven to increase long-term learning outcomes, but pretty much never implemented in any of my classes. And that really was my inspiration to build a learning platform that makes it easy for instructors to incorporate these principles into their classes.
I love that. I love that I'm like writing notes for myself because I try to keep track of some of this because I just think this is so exciting. And I remember when I met you, for our listeners, I met Alec in person at the CSTA National Conference this past summer. And I remember us talking about this and being so excited that this is all based on you looking at like these long-term learning and how this really works and how that can benefit our students. And that is just so powerful and so important because I think that's something that's really missing in a lot of our content and curriculum that we see these days is this like longevity. So I love to hear that you really started studying that and that went into open class.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. And obviously, I'm biased, but totally agree with everything that you just said there. And to me, the really cool thing too is, instructors can know about some of the things that I talked about, like spaced repetition, retrieval practice, all of these different learning principles, but they also don't need to know about them to be able to use this platform. The idea is that whether you know about these principles or not, they tend to just be really difficult to implement, even for the instructors that do know about them to incorporate into their classes. The goal of open class is to make it easy for those instructors. And I really appreciate what you said. Like, I just think it's something so missing from traditional education. And that's why we're here trying to fill that gap.
Absolutely. I just think that's so powerful and exciting. And I think we're going to touch on some of this a bit a little bit more maybe in our question three. So I'll hold off on one more question for you. But our next question for you was, how can computer science teachers maximize the effectiveness of open class within their classroom?
Yeah, really good question. So I'll say a couple things about that. First of all, I've been working on OpenClass now full time for about 5.5 years. So through those 5.5 years, the platform has grown tremendously. And really, our goal is to make it as easy as possible for instructors that you basically just can sign up for an account on OpenClass. You can use one of our pre-built assignment sets and kind of just publish those assignments and go, and not really require a ton of heavy lifting for the instructors. But at the same time, to answer your question about how teachers can maximize the effectiveness, hopefully it's very effective on its own, just using kind of the out of the box content that we already have available. But for the super dedicated instructors that really want to have full control over their curriculum, they can go into our platform. They can use any of our pre-built assignment sets for classes like APCSA, APCSP, Intro to Python, Intro to Swift, others as a starting point. And they can still go in, edit any of the content, remove any questions that they feel might be out of scope for their classes, change any questions, author their own questions, and really customize it for their own students to really get even more out of OpenClass.
I really like that. It's something that, I mean, I like how you say a little bit more control. I will self-proclaim I'm a bit of a control freak, and bit was a word that I
Good.
wouldn't even use if people are listening to this who know me. um, but it's so awesome to know that there's something here that, like, like we were touching on previously, is it's backed by all of these learning strategies and these, the way the brain works and the way the brain learns. And so I can have ownership over things that I really know and understand, but then I also can turn to something that's like, I don't have to be the sole expert in every single one of these content areas. Or if I know that I'm lacking in an area, there's something there for me and I can go grab it. And I think that's what I really like as someone who is a bit more of a control of this. I can go edit, or I can also turn to it and be like, man, I don't know how to hit this one in that type of environment. It's going to be there and ready for me.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll just say, speaking on sort of behalf of the instructors that like that control, and the term that I prefer to use is just like the dedicated instructors that really care about their students, want to put in all of the time to make sure all of their assignments are perfect for their students. First of all, we love these instructors. Like, you are superheroes. Like, keep doing what you're doing. It's so much needed. But I will say that kind of on the journey of OpenClass, again, we're very much a startup and we've just grown so much over the last 5.5 years. We started this platform out 5.5 years ago, really only targeting the most dedicated of instructors, because before we had pre-built assignment sets, before we had a lot of these AI powered tools that allow instructors to go in and very easily generate content, our platform is basically, hey, instructors can go in and build review assignments from scratch, build lessons from scratch, build quizzes from scratch. And the truth is, it just required a lot of work for every instructor to create their own content. But we were really targeting like the most dedicated of instructors that wanted to leverage these principles like spaced repetition, retrieval practice, active learning, that wanted to incorporate adaptive reviews into their classes and just help them format their teachings in a way that'll help their students learn. So that's all that we were targeting for the first few years of this platform. As we've grown and just had a bunch of instructors building content, that's when it made sense for us to start opening up some of the existing sort of assignment sets for various classes. And then as part of like this LLM craze with how much tools like ChatGPT have grown and Llama 3, et cetera, incorporating those into our platform as well, so instructors can very easily generate content. But so the first, let's say, 3 years of OpenClass was just targeting the top 5 or 10% of instructors that were super dedicated and wanted that control. And then we've added, these pre-built assignment sets and AI-powered tools to help us reach the other 90% of instructors who, by the way, it's totally fine for the instructors listening to it if you are in that other 90% that maybe you don't have as much time on your hands, or maybe you haven't been teaching for as long and just kind of want sort of things that are out of the box, that are proven, that will work well. that's totally fine. And we're very excited that we can now reach more instructors as well.
I like that. So something, and we talked a little bit about the difference in Wyoming before we started to other places, but something that a lot of our folks who join us don't know is Wyoming is just like very small when it comes to human capital. We have very
Mhm.
few people, which we love it that way. That's intentional. Most of us live here on purpose. But we find that we have a lot of computer science teachers that at the secondary level occasionally right now are being like, that voluntold that you're going to step into a computer science role now. And I think of open
Yeah.
classes being what a wonderful thing to have for someone who maybe even does feel comfortable with certain computer science courses, but all of a sudden they're being told, hey, you're adding these two classes to your course load. Like, here we go. And how great to know that you have a place that you can step in and you know that the resources are proven and they're useful and they're going to be helpful for students and they have all of these great exciting things built into them. Like, what a wonderful thing as an educator to feel like you have a
Mhm.
starting place.
Yeah, that is such an amazing point. And to be honest, I can only imagine, I know from like a legislative standpoint, it's really within the last like 7 or 8 years that a lot of states have started to require computer science education as part of their curricula. And I can only imagine like 7 years ago, a teacher who has been a career math teacher or biology teacher being told, hey, like we need to offer computer science now. Like you're the instructor, and they have no idea about any computer science concepts or things like that. Without tools like OpenClass, I think it would have been just so overwhelming. And now for these instructors, like you said, now they have tools available to help them, hopefully give them confidence as they're teaching their classes that, hey, you have really good assignments that'll help your students learn and retain the information. Whether or not you have mastered how to teach it yet or not, this is going to come in and help your students retain the information.
Yes, like we at least know we have a part of the puzzle that is going to be solid and wonderful at that point. And what a
Exactly.
like sweat off your back for a bit there, right? Like at least you have something at that point. And that
Totally.
really is such a relief for some of our folks. And I can see even myself who has been doing this very intentionally for several years. I'm like, this is incredible. What a great thing to know I could start a new course and have something right away that I don't have to start at square one and try to build it myself. So for our next question, we have this one's a bit much, so I'm going to be fair with you. Like we're kind of giving you the 1-2 punch on these next two. We're making you earn it. So it's adaptive review is a powerful tool for personalized learning. Can you explain how
Mhm.
Open Class identifies and addresses individual student needs through adaptive review, and what kind of outcomes teachers have reported from this?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the adaptive review format, that was actually the first format that we implemented in OpenClass before we added the quizzes and before we added the lessons. That was basically the core idea of OpenClass was helping instructors incorporate these adaptive review assignments that leverage all of these validated learning principles. So that's baked right into the format. Basically, how it works is a student will be going through a review assignment that may have anywhere between 1 to 5 learning objectives for it. And if a student is missing questions on a specific learning objective, let's say, for example, they're struggling with writing for loops, they're going to be getting questions like, you know, write a for loop to iterate through this list or output that or whatever the case may be. If a student is struggling with those concepts, the assignment will adapt to slow the pace of the assignment, give them easier questions, and a ton of feedback to help them better understand the material before allowing them to move on with the assignment. And the other thing that's really cool too, going back to these learning principles, the review assignment format automatically incorporates spaced repetition. And basically, for instructors that don't know about spaced repetition is the learning principle that reviewing previously learned concepts in spaced intervals significantly improves long-term learning outcomes. And basically, how the review assignment format automatically implements this is, let's say you publish your 5th review assignment in your course. That review assignment will cover mostly questions and concepts from Unit 5, but also strategically reintegrate questions from the first 4 units to where it strategically basically pulls questions based on what have learners not seen in a while and what did learners struggle with earlier on in the course. So if a learner's struggling with something, they're going to see that concept throughout the duration of the course to really make sure they understand it rather than just, struggling with it throughout the rest of the course. And then when you have concepts that kind of build upon the previous ones, those students are just going to be so lost in a traditional class. This review assignment format really helps avoid that. And to answer the second part of the question about just learning outcomes, and even going back earlier to just kind of meeting in Vegas where, at the CSTA conference, there are so many different learning vendors. And I think it's something that I can empathize with for a lot of instructors that may feel so overwhelmed that there are so many different learning tools out there. How can I really differentiate all of these tools? And I could spend an hour on this podcast talking about like how our design is the best and just more about like all of these learning principles and all of these other things. But to me, if I had to say the most unique thing about OpenClass, and I guess the one thing that I would want instructors listening to this to take away has been just how positive the feedback has been from administrators using the OpenClass platform, from instructors, and from students on the platform. And just as an example, we have a lot of instructors who have shared screenshots of their students' messages from their class Slack or Discord channels saying things like, I love the OpenClass, I want more OpenClass assignments. And to me, I just think back to when I was a student, I could never in a million years imagine ever going up to any of my former teachers and saying like, hey, like when's their next quiz coming out? When's their next homework assignment? And that's been a regular theme within OpenClass. And to me, the reason for that has been we're trying to shift what homework is from this punitive based thing where if students miss question, they're going to lose points in their grade. And it's this, very stressful thing that generally doesn't really help students learn the material, more towards this mastery based approach where if you miss a question, you're not going to lose points in your grade. Instead, you're just going to get more feedback and more practice to really help bring you up to speed with the rest of the class content. Other examples of learning outcomes. Here's a specific example. We had a class at Laredo College. Again, for your listeners, we're being used at the high school level and higher education level, but we did have one class at the higher education level, Laredo College, report a 35% increase on their exam scores for their class using OpenClass versus their class not using OpenClass. So just one piece of kind of anecdotal evidence on the efficacy of our platform. But to me, like I said, like our platform is leveraging all of these validated learning principles where there's so much research on the effectiveness of spaced repetition, the effectiveness of retrieval practice, or the generation effect, the effectiveness of distributed practice, all of these different learning principles that are just baked into the formats within OpenClass. So I know that was a long-winded response there, but hopefully that answers your question.
No, I think it was fantastic. I always forget that like our listeners can't actually see as I'm doing like my snaps over here and I'm excited about things. I always am like, you can't see this, but it's so exciting. Because I'm sitting here writing notes about one, just adaptive
Yeah.
review is just that is what we need for students, right? And that is how
Yeah.
we know the brain works. I mean, I shouldn't just say students, that's what people need to learn. But I'm sitting here listening to you explain how this works and how an adaptive review will adjust for them. And I'm sitting here saying, like, this is individualized instruction, lifetime, that is also, in a way, doing an intervention for a student if necessary without me having to step in and do
Yeah.
it. And that's huge. Like when we're talking about a student, a full class of students, and, I have one student who needs that individualized work on loops, right? Like they need a
Mm.
little bit more time or a little bit more instruction. They're not having to wait on me to get back to them. They're not having to wait on me to come back through and give them that intervention. This program's going to naturally kind of slow it down, give them more questions on it, give them a lot of really targeted feedback. How cool is that
Yes.
as a teacher to know that like my classes, like they are in a good place to be getting, kind of catching them before they even fall through those cracks. So that really is like individualized instruction that's taking place, in my opinion, without kind of autonomously taking place with me intervening when I finally can get back to a student. That's huge. They're not sitting there spinning their wheels waiting for me to get back. It's going to help them on their
Yeah.
way.
Oh yeah, 100%. A couple comments. first, as someone that's on this video call and can see your snaps as I'm talking, I very much appreciate it. So thank you so much for that. I know that the
You're
listeners
welcome.
can't see it, but yeah, no, that's awesome. And regarding your comment on like the individualized practice, so much of what you were just saying there is kind of our thesis behind OpenClass, that in any given class, whether you're in a high school class with, let's say, 30 students, or in a college class with, let's say, 400 students in your lecture, everyone has slightly different learning preferences and learning paces. It's impossible for the one instructor to reach the unique needs of all of their students in their class. That's where this open class review assignment format really comes into play, where you may have some students that just grasp the material immediately. Those
Yes.
students will go through the open class review assignments and finish them very quickly because they're going to demonstrate mastery very quickly. The students that are struggling a little bit more, they're just going to get more practice to help really get them up to speed with the rest of the class. It may take them longer to complete the assignments, but at the end of the day, they're going to get the same grade as the student that really understood it well. And they're also going to get up to speed with that student. So everyone's kind of on the same page with all of this. But exactly as you said, the students that are struggling get the practice that they really need to really help keep them on track with the class.
Which is just really, it is the important piece there. And when we talk, computer science, especially, lots of our curriculum that we do in schools, high school, elementary, everywhere we look, but computer science especially, like, I do feel it's just so mastery. Like, there are so many things that I do that I'm like, listen, if you don't know this part, it's going to be really hard to do the rest of this. And so there's so much benefit in that, really slowing them down and like, you got to get this before we can move on. And so that mastery based learning is just, that's powerful stuff, and it's really important. I see a lot of that with my students where they're like ready to move along and they're like, I'm not really getting it, I'm just going to keep going. And I'm like, I really don't think you should.
Mm,
Like, you're going to need to know this, buddy. Like, this is going to be really difficult to do in a couple weeks if you don't have this. And so how cool that
yeah,
this would continue to scaffold them and get them there,
yeah.
while I get to continue with some other things. So okay, our last real question. Go ahead.
Sorry, lastly, just kind of like
No.
piggybacking off what you just said there are some subjects, I think, like if you're learning about history, it may not be as big of a deal if you like struggle early on, because after you learn about, I don't know, the early stages of US history, you're going to move on to a different era and probably not really need to build upon that previous knowledge. For other subjects like computer science comes to mind, math and others, if you're in a class and you don't understand the early concepts, all of the later concepts, they're so hierarchical structured where each concept kind of builds upon the previous, that if you're really struggling early on, you're just going to be in such a bad place later on if you don't figure that out. So it really is so important. And yeah, just wanted to chime in and kind of piggyback on what you just said there.
You're absolutely correct. It's that true need for mastery, because that's where intervention is so important, right? That we see, and that's where this having that kind of built into this program is so important, because you're going to be sunk later if you don't have it now. And you're right, like math, right? Like, there comes a point where if I don't know how to do my multiplication, I'm pretty well sunk in everything else. And it is, I
Exactly.
feel very the same in my coding. I'm like, man, you have got to know this. And if you don't at some point, you are very leveled out at what you can do in your programming from now on. So how wonderful. I do have
100%.
one left for you. Again, this one's
Absolutely.
kind of a big one. I'm going to be honest. We really
I'm
got
ready for
after
it.
you on these. So you did the last one
Great.
great though. So how does OpenClass ensure that the ready-made assignments for APCSA and APCSP are not only aligned with the College Board's framework, but
Mhm.
also enhance student comprehension and mastery for complex computer science concepts?
Yeah, great question. So I'll answer that in two parts. Regarding how do we ensure it aligns with the College Board frameworks, that's how these courses were built. So for the APCSA and APCSP courses specifically, we work with subject matter experts on those subjects to really make sure all of the units follow and all of the assignments follow the College Board's course framework for those two courses. And we've also been working with the computer science teachers on our platform that are using these assignments, because they tend to have some feedback on, hey, here's how I would reword some of these questions. We had some students that were confused with these concepts and things like that. So a lot of it is very much community driven as well, that when there are suggestions, we're always looking for ways and how we can improve our platform, build new features, and then also for the content, how can we improve this curriculum? So it's taking a lot of feedback from our instructors, and yeah, I would say ensuring like maximum outcomes for students, like that's the entire purpose of the platform. And we do that kind of automatically through the formats of our assignments that, as I've mentioned a few times already, all of our assignment formats leverage these validated learning principles proven to optimize long-term learning outcomes. So hopefully that's baked right in, that as students go through mastery quizzes or interactive lessons or adaptive review assignments, by the nature of the assignment, it's going to help them master that material.
Mhm. I just love anytime I am discussing with someone or using a resource, there's like two things here that we see, and I feel like I can speak for most educators. Like you are either speaking to someone and you're like, man, you have designed this without talking to an actual educator, or thank you
Mm-hmm.
for asking for teachers to give you feedback. And so as I'm listening to you and you're like, hey, we're listening to our teachers, and they're like, kids really didn't understand this question, or this was worded a little bit weird, and I'm sitting
Mm-hmm.
here and I know, and our listeners don't yet, but they will in a second, that your mom was an educator, or maybe still is even an educator. But I'm like, this is why you are listening to teachers. So I love that. Applaud you. Thank you. Because it makes a huge difference in the resources that we see and use. When I'm like, I don't think an educator's ever seen this. Like, no one's ever looked at this who is actually in a classroom. So how wonderful that you are pulling in teachers as well, not just that AP College Board framework. You're aligning with that, but you're also aligning with student and teacher needs. And that is just the best we could possibly ask for, right? Like, what more could you want?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. And as we were talking about it also before we started recording here, I think it's so important for the vendors and the instructors to be pulling the rope in the same direction. We're all on the same team here. And I think it's important for the vendors to understand like what are instructors trying to accomplish through these platforms. And I guess I can only speak for myself personally, but I just feel like getting that instructor feedback and also administrative feedback, student feedback, it's so important for a startup, I think, to just understand how their users are interacting with the platform, that we always try to seek out that feedback from, again, instructors, administrators, students, any of our users, to really understand how users are interacting with the platform and how we can improve it. And I always tell instructors that I meet with, like, I cannot guarantee 100% that anything you say will be able to implement definitely within the platform. But
Right.
with that said, I always want to hear it. I want to hear what you're struggling with, what your students are struggling with, because at minimum, then we're aware of it. And so if these things keep coming up, like, we'll be able to know how to resolve them more quickly. But at best, it's definitely led to a lot of feature additions within the platform, content improvements, bug fixes, all of these things. So I think it's so important for the platform to continue to grow through instructor feedback. And just as one more quick anecdote about instructor feedback, I hope Gus, our first instructor, doesn't mind me sharing the story here. But basically, the founding story of OpenClass was I left my job in San Francisco where I was working as a software engineer, got a one-way ticket to Bali, Indonesia, which, don't get me started on that, was such an amazing time just building out the MVP of this platform. We could do another like travel pod on Bali, Indonesia, where I can talk more about that experience. But I ended up moving back to Tucson, Arizona, kind of on a whim. That's where I went to school at the University of Arizona. Again, just on a whim that I'd be able to find an instructor willing to use this platform. And I ended up connecting with an instructor named Gus who taught a natural language processing course. And he was formerly the TA of the class when I took it as a student and had since gone on to become the professor and the instructor of the course. And I'm so thankful that Gus was the first instructor of OpenClass because he was so transparent with all of his feedback. He really wanted to work with me and, give this thing a full shot. And this was right before COVID hit. So I was able to meet with Gus in person in his office on a weekly basis. I literally watched over his shoulder as he was struggling to create assignments. And I remember he kept like apologizing to me, like, oh, sorry, I don't understand like this tagging feature or like any of these things in here. And I was like, Gus, don't apologize. Like, this is the best feedback I could get. And over the course of the pilot, I actually tore down and rebuilt the assignment builder from scratch 2 times over because it was just too difficult for Gus initially. The first version of the assignment builder took us about 6 hours to create an assignment. The second version took him about 4 hours to build an assignment. And then the third version took him about 45 minutes to create assignments. So it was like just through the pilot, you can do the math on that. Math was never my strong suit, but we improved the optimization time significantly for instructors to create content. And again, none of this would have been possible if I wasn't so committed to working with instructors and getting instructor feedback and making sure, even though I would always describe the platform as learner first, like that's the main thing we care about at OpenClass is how can we improve learning outcomes. We do that hand in hand by working with the instructors and figuring out what their needs are, what their problems are, and building our platform to solve those needs.
Absolutely. I just love it. Again, I'm like all the finger snaps over here, all the claps, because it's just so exciting to hear this stuff because it is. And really I teach AP computer science A and computer science principles. And it is so important that we are meeting the framework for AP College Board, but it is also so important that my students are learning these skills and
Exactly.
comprehending them. Like this is still a course I'm teaching that has a purpose, right? And I want them to learn. And so how amazing that that is still student centered and that is still teacher centered and there's still a purpose there behind that. And it's really wonderful to hear and it's very exciting. And I do just love the words you said that I wrote down and I keep coming back to as you were saying all of those things is exactly it's community driven. Like this is based on our
Yeah.
community and wanting it to be student and teacher centered because that's the heart of this for OpenClass. And what a cool opportunity for students and teachers alike to get to interact with this and see what you have. I really appreciate you joining us today. This was incredible. Thank you so much. I am certain our listeners are going to want to find out more. And if they do want to reach out to you and want to see more or get in touch with you, where can they do that? We will put that in our podcast notes. So, where can they find you?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. And I'm really excited that OpenClass will hopefully be able to reach some instructors and students in Wyoming. In terms of like next steps from here, one, anyone listening to this, any instructor is able to sign up. They can go to our website, openclass.ai. There should be a little link at the top where instructors can see our catalog. And from there, you can search like APCSP, APCSA, request access to those materials. If you want to just create an account and start playing around with the platform, you can also just do that from the website too, openclass.ai. And instructors can also reach out to me directly. My email is alec@openclass.ai. Here's a little deal that we'll offer to any Wyoming instructors who find out about OpenClass through this podcast. Shoot me an email and we'll upgrade your account to our pro license for free. Again, like we're a mission driven startup. Like our main goal isn't to maximize profits at all costs necessary. Like we actually care about student learning outcomes. We want to work with instructors. Again, we feel like we're all in this as a team. So email me at alec@openclass.ai. Don't feel like you're bothering me. Like this is what I love to do. I love to work with instructors. I love to help instructors create better classes. That's the entire goal of OpenClass. So that's where anyone can reach me. Again, just mention you found out about OpenClass through CSTA Wyoming, and we'll happily upgrade your account to our pro license for free.
That is so amazing. Thank you so much. And I will just tell our listeners this has been such a wonderful interview, Alec. It's been so fun to meet someone that is just so passionate about what you have created and passionate about it for the reasons of our students and what they get to see and what you missed out on, which is very much why a lot of us have stepped into this role of computer science education, is what we had missed out on ourselves.
Yeah.
So what a really rewarding thing to get to do and to be a part of this. And thank you for offering such a cool thing to our listeners as well if they shoot you an email. This has been incredible and we really appreciate it. Thank you again. Quick reminder to any of our listeners, if you go visit our CSTA Wyoming website, please register for the upcoming summer conference. That'll actually be on the WACD website as well for our upcoming conference. We will get those live within the next couple weeks, is our hope. And please follow along with us at Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook so you can stay up to date with all things computer science.